Hey everyone, just going to make another drawing here, but I thought I'd start before I do the drawing. I'd show a few of the materials that I'm going to use. Recently, I've talked a little bit about this, but recently my partner Gayla and I we made some of these kind of, they're 4 collages, but using just spray paint and various, mostly plant material as resists. Just a fun time outside, just spraying, making kind of random, not really intending to make anything that looks like anything, but intending to make things that their primary purpose is just things that are going to be cut up. So I thought I'd show some of them first, and then I'll use it. This is actually just the big sheet of paper that we had down on our driveway while we were making a lot of mess, so that our driveway didn't look like a crime scene afterwards. Anyway, so I just thought I'd show a few of those, and then I'm going to pick a couple of these and cut a few up just to get us started. And again, I'm going to be working in the ledger that's over to the left there, and I've only got a few. I think this drawing that I'm about to do is the kind of fourth to last in the book, so I'm almost finished working my way through that. And I've said before, but I do have another couple similar sized books, but not of the same kind of vintage as this 90-year-old book that I've been drawing in. So this process, like with these bits of paper here, is kind of similar to really any sort of kind of collage material. I don't have a plan when I'm making these things. I'm just sort of, you can see that was a bit of actually an offsheet where there was just overspray of some black spray paint that kind of formed that nice little edge. And so I just like that. And then here I'm just sort of cutting semi-arbitrary kind of shapes out of these colored things. You can see in the end the elements that were kind of plant-based kind of shapes, you don't really see that anymore. You might see it if you looked at the full sheet, but initially it's actually more just almost similar to how I kind of wipe paint around when I'm actually doing the drawing directly on the pages of the ledger. But I just find this an interesting thing to have. It's almost like working with, self-made ready-mades, self-made materials. But well, it isn't almost that. I guess it's exactly that. But it gives me a starting kind of reference point where I've already made some decisions before the drawing, as simple as they are. These sort of simple spray. Like I say, it's like you throw a plant down, you spray kind of around it, and you get the kind of interesting natural forms of the various plants. And that kind of forms just more like kind of scattered lines. Now I'm going back to the last drawing I posted. This is a bit of the graph paper that I used in that case that I pre-painted. So yeah, like I'm saying, I'm making choices here. Obviously, like I'm deciding to make a bunch of pretty rectangular forms. I may change that as I'm going through. I may decide to tear some of those. Sometimes what I like is like a partially squared off or hard angled form with like one side or another side that's torn, so it's a bit more kind of loose and natural. I'm over here on the off camera. I need to bring this back because I wanted to actually start with a bit of the same graph paper that I've did the orange paint on last time. I wanted a bit of that in kind of its white form, just as a starting point on the page. It's funny watching myself make some of these decisions, because it's like I put one rectangular sheet of paper down beside another rectangular sheet of paper, and there's a decision there somehow that I don't know. I couldn't tell, probably couldn't tell you why I chose one over the other, but in the moment it's sort of like I went for the thicker one, whatever my mind was going for there. here's just a little, sometimes I actually like to do this sort of thing, just kind of, I'm doing this a bit for the camera, but also just for myself, just sort of flipping through, and I've ended up on the last drawing that I filmed, and one change I'm going to make this time in just a moment is to do the whole drawing close up like this. I've been doing them at a bit of a distance, and again, my partner Gail is saying that she found that it was harder to follow along and see some of the decisions I was making, some of the lines I was making as I was drawing, because I had it sort of at arm's length. The board I just put down that I use somewhat as a bit of a cutting surface, but also a bit of like a gluing kind of surface, is, you can see there's some drawing on it. It actually was, we got one day at this kind of art club show, a stack of basically free boards that someone had started paintings on, but never finished, and they were just getting rid of the boards. So I kind of like it as almost as its own piece of art, but I'm also kind of destroying it by doing various, slathering it with glue and cutting on top of it, that sort of thing. As I've said before, here I'm using again it's just acrylic matte medium, and I'm using it as an adhesive basically for the collage papers I'm going to put down. In one of the other videos, I talked about this a little bit. It's a very, this is a very, very common practice. Sometimes I do use glue stick or other glues, but what I do like about this is that it kind of brings the, it's not so, glue stick putting something down, it can be fairly pristine. The surface stays, like sometimes you want that. In some cases, what I want here, I'm even sort of messing with it a little bit, is I actually want a bit of movement in there. I want to stick down properly because I don't want it coming back up, but I also want a bit of movement in the shape itself, and also kind of on top of it. Because the matte medium will, I will usually scrape it down a little bit thinner, but it gives a bit of, like I say, a bit of texture, a bit of movement to the paper, which I don't want too much because I usually want to draw on top of this. But the other nice thing actually about the matte medium is it does, it creates a pretty good drawing surface afterwards. You can draw on top of it quite nicely, especially with pencil. Not so much pen actually, but I tend to do most of my drawings here. I don't use a lot of marker or pen or anything like that for this kind of work. I either use straight up pencil, or I'll use like a water soluble pencils, that sort of thing. The other thing I actually quite like about this, you can see it a bit there as I was doing the corner of that piece. For whatever reason, the matte medium actually activates and smudges the old ink that is used for the grid lines, the column and row lines in this old ledger. To someone else, that would be terrible. For me, I actually like that quite a bit. I like that it sort of, again, kind of takes the static surface of the page and mushes it around a little bit. It's especially seems to affect the horizontal lines on the page aren't as affected. The thicker vertical blue lines and the thicker vertical red lines seem to get smudged. Don't know why, whether there's two different kinds of printing at work here. Like I've said, this book is a 90-ish year old book, so this how this page was laid out was probably a fairly arduous kind of system of I I'm not sure exactly how they made these things, whether this is a lot of lead spacers and thin lines spread out to do this as each page as letterpress, or if there's another technique. Actually, a friend of mine said he had watched a video about the making of books like this, so I should hit him up and see if he still knows about that, because I am curious. even good to know. Like I know very little about the history of this book. I've said before, it's the Farmers Fire Insurance Company of York, Pennsylvania. That's where this book hails from, and most likely it's from the 1930s, 1940s, something like that. That's why I say like 90-ish kind of. It's a pretty old book at this point, but it doesn't have any use history because it was a completely blank book when I got it. So it's not like anyone actually used this. This was sort of like, I guess, ready to be used by an insurance agent, and then never got used and probably got put in a closet somewhere. And I mean, I would love to have found more of these. Like somewhere out there, if one of these exists, there's probably a box of these somewhere that were all printed at that time and never got used. But sometimes you find things at thrift stores and junk shops that are these, like, they're not really a one-off, but they're a one-off purchase to you and kind of special, obviously. You can see just I've put down everything's very kind of glossy looking at this stage, so it looks like I wouldn't want it to ever end this way. I actually don't like too much shine in the end thing, but this is actually an acrylic matte medium, so that glossiness will tone down. It's just like I've said in previous videos, I'm working quickly enough that everything is staying wet, and I don't. I could probably get a hairdryer or something and dry in between, but I just don't. The pause here in me not doing anything is I am letting it dry a little bit, but I'm also over looking at kind of paint options and thinking about where I'm going next. Yeah, you can't quite see what I'm doing, but I did a little test off to the side here. Yeah, it's a Prussian blue, and I just wanted to make sure that it was. I've got a couple of different. I think I have two Prussian blues and from different makers, and I want to make sure this one was the one I remembered. It's the nicer of the two Prussian blues. It makes it seem like I'm not going for anything particular here, but it is I guess the particularness is I did want to counter the kind of almost kind of flower tones, the pinks and that chartreusey kind of or almost neon kind of yellow with this. I was looking. Sorry, I was looking at the my palette knife there, or it's not. I guess it's actually more just like a big. Anyway, I was looking at it because it was making all those streaks. I had recently used that for something else, and I realized it was a little bit dirty. So there's a point a little bit later where I have to actually kind of clean that off because it had gunk on it, left those streaks. I don't mind them in the end. I didn't. Sometimes I want a flat-ish tone of color, but the fact that the tool, pretty much all the tools I use for this are not tools you would choose to use for precise work, and also I don't, like you can see here with these kind of, I'm making these kind of cloud-like or sweeping kind of gestural marks with this pencil, and so I'm wanting that motion, but then I'm not being specific about what those lines are. It's just as I move my hand around, it's like I'm making, I guess, little kind of micro decisions. It's a funny thing trying to like articulate or explain the purpose of scribbles, or the meaning of scribbles. There is obviously there's no meaning here, but but it gets at a final feeling. It's more, I guess that's the thing. It's the physicality of making those marks. And then, yeah, I'm deciding here's a good use for that scraper to actually try and dry this a little bit. I realized that the paper, you can see it down there on the bottom right, that the paper is still so kind of soft from the matte medium. It'll harden right up, but that I was, instead of drawing kind of on top of that, I was kind of incising into the paper, which I don't mind the end result in this case, but I realized that I needed a little bit more drying. And then I picked this pink here because you can see it connects. It's not exactly the same color, but it connects with that color that was in one of the spray paper sheets that I cut up at the beginning. If you look in that one sprayed section there, the kind of yellow and pink horizontal one, you can still see some little plant forms in there. That was a like grass seed on a stem that I sprayed on top of. So it's got that kind of scattered look. It ends up kind of matching the strokes of pink that I put at the top there, kind of match that a little bit. There was obviously, that was kind of my intention, to get that, follow that same motion upwards. Here we go. Yeah, here's me. I don't know why. I guess I wanted to do this while I was still going, just in case I need to bring this back. But yeah, I had so much. It's actually some silicone. I was doing something else. I was doing a non-art project around the house, sealing something with some silicone, and I used that same scraper. And so it actually has a little bit of silicone residue left on it that's what I'm scraping off there. I can't say that I necessarily take good care of the tools that I use for making artwork. They, nothing is expensive anyway. That scraper is meant for just doing spackling, like household reno kind of projects. But for painting, I like the fact that it's so wide. It really is a, because I do try occasionally. I think you've seen other things. I used one earlier for the pink paint at the top. I've got these small, more like painterly, or some of them are even kind of sculptural tools, for more precise kind of applying of paint with a palette knife. But I think I actually prefer the big slab kind of messy palette knife approach, unless occasionally I do need precision for something I want to do. But yeah, I like that big hardware store style knife. I've mentioned circles before, but so here's this little bit of this circle template here is not anything that was meant for drawing or drafting or anything like that. It actually came from the thrift store. It was part of a kid's DIY project thing. I think it was like originally a little Home Depot project. I think it was for kids like tic-tac-toe or something like that, or almost like Connect 3 or something. Maybe I'm forgetting now, but bought the little set because it had a bunch of little wooden pieces, and I saw that it had that grid of 9 circles, which was amazing for me because for quite a long time, like I do have, I have this circle motif in many, many drawings, but I've also very specifically often drawn a grid of 9 circles even before I got this template. Sometimes I would draw them freehand, but so finding this was sort of like one of those really interesting happenstance of like, oh, this is a tool that I would never be able, it wouldn't exist other than in this kit. It wouldn't exist as a tool. And so for me, it was an amazing find as a type of template. And so you can tell by when I had it in the frame there how gunked up and painted over and messy it is. It's like I've used it quite a lot just because I already had that kind of repeated, like I say, grid of kind of 9 circles as a repeated motif. And so it was interesting to have something that enforced the kind of scale and sizing of that to something, because occasionally I want, I think that, like I've said in previous videos, the use of kind of drawing templates, drafting templates like circles and other forms, primarily circles, is not clearly, as you can see, it's not precision. I'm not trying to make perfect circles, but it is a repetition of a certain form. There's something I've described them in other videos as like I use these circles, especially these kind of black dark circles. I feel like they kind of ground the image. They maybe that doesn't make sense, but they sort of hold it down in a sense. And so I like having not precision, but the same kind of form that I can repeatedly use. I have occasionally just drawn, well, quite frequently I've drawn my own circles, that sort of thing. But like I say, there's something unique about them not being unique. They maybe they're a counter to a lot of the other forms in here, which are scribble, tear, swipe. Like there's a lot of the underpainting and the undercollage. There are edges and rectangular forms, but there's also a lot of motion and kind of organic movement. And then the circles are both organic because, I don't know, roundness kind of has an inherent organicness to it, the sort of lack of sides or an infinite side kind of thing. So yeah, I like that play of organic feeling, motion, and also clearly grid forms, horizontals and verticals. I'm now drawing another one of these sort of semi-freeform grids. So the kind of row lines I'm putting down here are informed obviously by the horizontal blue lines of this ledger page, but I'm also not following them exactly. And then when I put in kind of column lines in the hand-drawn grid, I'm not measuring that space. I'm sort of just moving over the ruler by what looks good. It's not too bad. I'm sure it's all of them are probably less than a millimeter off kind of thing, but I don't really want them to be perfectly sized. I've got, I already have the grid of the paper underneath, and then I have the pure grid form of the graph paper there. But although the graph paper, you can see it's not perfectly laid down and also wasn't perfectly cut, so it also doesn't have it doesn't have its horizontals and verticals don't perfectly match the grid of the page, which I wouldn't want too much of that. I kind of want a bit of for everything to be, like I say, have a little bit of organic motion to it. I don't know, I've been trying to think of, because I've been doing these sort of drawn on grids recently. and I'm not sure what's been drawing me to it. Obviously, like I've said, there's already a grid in place. Although the grid of the page, you can see now that you're a little bit closer in here, you can see that there's a fairly the horizontal ruling is pretty standardized, but then for the vertical ruling, there are a lot of different column widths, and so it doesn't form a grid. It forms a matrix, but not like a static kind of squared off grid. Here again, I'm sort of playing with a recent form of these sort of semicircles inside a grid, and I've decided to even now they're kind of like quarter circles inside a half circle. Again, just sort of playing with graphic forms, and it's nice that these kind of I've talked about tools before. I really love the blackness of the Stabilo. I'm going to get the name correct this time because I think I've said it a few times, but they're actually just called All, like Stabilo All. I think they used to call them like All Right or something, but yeah, this just Stabilo All, which essentially just means they'll write on most things. They've got a waxiness and a softness there, so they're somewhere between a crayon and a pastel, but don't go down like either. They're harder than the pastel and softer than the crayon, and they don't have the resist of wax because they're water soluble. So I could actually paint over those and smudge them all over the place. Sometimes I'll do a quick a bit of the acrylic medium over top of this. It will smudge it, but then it also, if I want to draw or paint over top of it, that's what I do to kind of create a barrier between liquids and that stuff. Now I think I'm just, because the top area was still quite wet, I'm both thinking about where else to go, but I've also pulled out this book. I got, I think I'll show the cover in just a sec here. I got these at our downtown thrift store. It's this very small store that still has kind of thrift store prices. So these are old, I think like 70s era elementary school encyclopedias, but I think they're mostly reading, even though they're encyclopedias. So I'm just flipping through trying to find words that jump out to me, and in this case, there were a couple words on that page. The first kind of phrase being often a photograph, and then there was a little bit more. The actual context in there was about, I think about archaeology and preservation and how they'll often take a photograph, but then sometimes there are other means of preserving. I think the phrasing was often a photograph, sometimes a copy. So often I will in grabbing kind of a source like that, the words just have they have an interest to me, I guess, or they have, as a phrase, they feel interesting. I don't really know what they're referring to in my mind when I choose words like this. Sometimes they'll just be words that pop into my head, but I do like this sort of semi-automatic technique of having materials nearby that I can kind of flip through, and if something jumps out at me, then I'll go with it. If nothing does, then I won't. So in this case, it's almost like trying to find within the context of this drawing where, if those words have resonated in whatever way, trying to find some place for them to sit. Because I don't, obviously the words themselves as I'm writing them are rough but legible, but I also don't like them to just be, maybe sometimes I do, but I don't like them to just be read as a passage of text. I kind of want the words to move around the page like the colors, like the lines. And so you can read portions of the text in whatever way you want to. If your eye is kind of moving from top to bottom or bottom left, top right kind of thing, you're going to read the bits of text as you see it. In terms of a Western interpretation, you might always be sort of left, right, top, down. But I think the thing with art, and especially abstract art, and the use of text, you're kind of giving a freedom to be drawn down to one aspect. Like in this case, my eye jumps right down past the blue smudged form to my grid with the semicircles at the bottom, and then sort of jumps back up. So it's playing with the balance of what's already on the page, and then seeing, sometimes I add text like I'm doing now, and I deeply regret it because it's harder once you get text in there. It can really mess with the balance. So you can see now that I've got that bit of text, you can read it as sometimes a copy, often a photograph, or you can read a copy, photograph, sometimes, often you can, there's sometimes, some of it will make sense in a way, and some of it is just are just words, as shapes and marks. I mean, this is a case where I've chosen they were from the same page in that book, but they were separated, but they obviously had a shared context, and so they're more likely to be read together. In a lot of other work I've done, the text that's gone down, the only association is me putting them on the same page. I'll pick text from various places. Now is one of those times where I feel like I want to put a bit more text in here, but there was somewhat of a hesitation because I didn't know, like I said, there's a way of kind of messing things up if I put too much text, for instance. But yeah, I went for it. And here's, you can see how wet that was. I almost had a minor disaster in that page was stuck to that blue paint below, but it worked out. I did a little tiny word play there, so instead of just the word sometimes, I made it sometimes. Who knows what I meant by that, but I think that's taking the word forms and seeing if they can have multiple uses or multiple ways of being read. Again, some of those, these kind of arcing, almost wind-like, wave-like, cloud-like forms back on top. Vain attempt to dry briefly. The blue actually there, like I've said before, the acrylics, certain acrylics, you can get very matte acrylics, obviously, but some of the acrylics I use, their end form, like that blue, will always probably be a little bit plasticky, but they are, it has enough kind of tooth to it that you can still draw on top of it. Yeah, there's a point in these where I do at a certain point have to convince myself to stop. There's an inner dialogue that happens where I'm like, like, don't you think you're done? Are you sure? Are you sure? And so, I was doing a bit there, and then I'm thinking like, okay, what about that? I've got that kind of pink area up there, and I'm not sure whether it's my thinking was like, is it too does it have the structure of what's below? Because there's all this grid happening in that lower the kind of that bottom right corner there has this sort of inverted L grid happening. And so I'm debating whether I want some kind of weight, I guess, up in that upper corner. And I think while I'm doing that debating, these repeated X forms that I've done are kind of, sometimes X in this case it is a pleasing gesture to make, that sort of line and line, but it also can be a bit of a, to myself, almost like a negating mark, like I'm saying no. Hasn't stopped me clearly. You can tell I'm still going up here, and I'm deciding that yes, I do want a bit more of this actual kind of boxy structure in that area. And once I put down that first line, I actually regretted it. I was like, I didn't like how close it was to the text, but also once I started, I realized that, I wanted to try repeating that lower right grid up into this upper left. So you get this, you can sort of draw an invisible diagonal across the page between those two. I'm now wiping off that ruler because that pink paint was still wet, so I pulled a bunch of paint onto that ruler. I talked in the last video. This ruler is funny to me. It's got this bit of a little Bible verse on it, but I think it's actually the back of it. It's from the Coca-Cola company for some reason. So I said in the last video I posted that this was like one of those giveaway rulers, and I guess it was, but it's maybe like Coca-Cola distributor or Coca-Cola themselves were like giving out these rulers. I don't know who to, but or maybe they were giving them to distributors or something. I don't know what use they would have had for a Coca-Cola ruler, but I don't know. Maybe it was to shopkeepers or something. Maybe that makes more sense. But anyway, it's the funny things that that we end up finding that I kind of like to be able to use things, even if they are like, I have various collections. I actually have quite a few old rulers. I've got a bunch of those. I've got some slide rules. I've got some, I don't know what they're called actually, those kind of folding extendable rulers. Some of those are quite beautiful. I've got one that's quite nice wood, and it's got you can tell all the lettering is hand kind of incised, all the numbering I should say, and the lines. And then it has it's got like brass hinges, and anyway, very very fancy ruler. But I don't think I would use that for this because it feels a bit more like something to keep and just think of as a collectible. But anyway, I like to use certain things to their purpose, even if I like them as. Maybe it's like I like them even more because they're continuing to age and break down and get messy and that sort of thing. Like that ruler that I'm using here is, it's not like it was in good shape when I got it. So it's and it wasn't even a ruler that you would trust to give you a really true line. You can see if you look there at the top, it's kind of like got some dings out of it. Anyway, back to what I'm actually drawing here. So I've got the I've repeated that grid, and then I haven't done quite the same form. I've done sort of these full circles up there, and again the sort of darkened semicircle. And now because I did that, I'm looking at this lower portion here and thinking like, do I want... I was checking that because I wiped that off earlier and actually kind of ripped that graph paper a bit. But so now I have this debate of, do I want something to go below this grid area? And it's tricky because it's like, if I do that, it does kind of mess. There's already a balance here, and if I do more, it may or may not mess with that balance. Oh, just noticed a little mosquito flew by. Here I am in for the second time. I'm now sort of staring at this to see, is there more? And I decided yes. For better, for worse, I went in and added a little bit more, and it's sort of aligning with that top bit of the left-hand text. It's kind of because the right hand sometimes goes up above that section, and I want something that goes below. Yeah. And in the end, I was happy with it. I didn't feel like I had messed up this flow too much. But I also decided to do a little bit more here, because what I wanted to do is repeat this phrase, a copy, because, for semi-obvious reasons, I'm making a copy of the words a copy. And whatever that means, I'm not sure, but it's just like I've said, I kind of like this wordplay and visual play of text on these pages. And now here we go. Like I really cannot stop. And because I've decided to also repeat this word often. Again, sort of balance, because once I put that there, then I thought, I actually wanted this right side to dip down further, which it already was before I put in the text, a copy is made. But this end bit here is, I wanted to end almost with it's repeating that same often but then on its own, because it doesn't have the word photograph under it, it sort of reads as often a. And I've talked a little bit before about the use of, I think in almost all the videos I've posted so far, the use of kind of A and B in the drawings. And yeah, there was something in writing that I liked, that it was on its own. But it also means you can read this in a circuitous kind of fashion too. And now I think I've almost made enough marks. This is like a subtle, I wanted to, you can barely see the difference there, but I just wanted the slightly more of a hard edge along there. Now my mind is like, now I'm in sort of titling brain, because I've decided this is done. And now it's like, do I go for often? I've said often and sometimes quite a few times in this video, which is fine. I don't know if I'm affecting myself, but so it ends up being called sometimes, often. Which is a bit of a, some of the titles are kind of cop-outs maybe, but, or they're a little bit obvious, but it makes sense though that like because titles are words and if there's already words there, occasionally the words form the title. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes the words are there, but I just don't go any further. All right. Well, thanks for watching another one of these, and here's the big overview, and you can see my messy, not messy work surface. It's just messy enough. Sometimes it gets a little bit extra chaotic, and then I do give it a clean. But I like the scatter. I find I actually work best with, it's not distraction, with things that I can connect with on the periphery. I can sort of pull in things at a whim. I work best that way, just with drawing and in other forms.